Good morning, this is a technology overview from Lightenna. Today we're talking a little bit about DevOps. DevOps is neither a set of tools nor a job role. I've seen all kinds of things advertised, but what we're talking about here, DevOps in this context, is about development and operations working together. It's essentially about a collaboration, and as such, to engender a collaboration, we're talking about creating a culture. Peter Drucker said it best with that much overused quote that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So while you might have a cloud strategy, it's a DevOps culture that will allow you to realize that. That's a little bit that we're going to explore today. Underpinning all of that is collaboration, and collaboration is expensive. I think it's important when looking at any kind of collaboration to do a cost-benefit analysis, to think about what we're getting out of it and what it's going to cost to put into it. So collaboration is fundamentally hard to manage. It's expensive, it's bespoke or unique, it's at times inefficient. Also, collaboration is single-handedly responsible for probably the greatest feats that mankind has ever achieved. So collaboration is a crucial part of success in realizing web or digital projects, but it's also critical that it's managed really, really well. I think we exist in an environment that's often quite complicated, and that complexity alongside volatility, uncertainty, and ambiguity makes it very difficult to run a project in such a way where these two factions, dev and operations, are going to work together. What we need to move towards is what Bob Johansen described as VUCA Prime, or vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. Now, within that, a lot of industry buzzwords, a lot of management nonsense, but underneath it all is something really important. Clarity for a project is an asset. When projects don't have clear direction, where the vision is missing and they're immersed in a sea of volatility, where there isn't a shared understanding between all the members of the team, so there's a lot of uncertainty, where the complexity isn't really well mined and there isn't a clarity, and when there's a lot of ambiguity, we can be put in a position where our agility is compromised, because we end up in this sort of mire, this treacle that stops us from moving forward. Clarity for a project is an asset, and one of the things that I've seen work really well is where a common language is spoken amongst that team. So where development and operations embedded in the same team, working very closely together on source code. Everything has source code. So we've started out with application source code. There's been a real movement recently about infrastructure as code, but actually all aspects of the project can be delivered as source code, and that's one of the things that we're going to be pushing forward over the next few months, and Lightenna will be releasing examples to show how this stuff really looks and works. Of course, it's version control, but by version control we're not simply talking about putting a label on it or just a version number. What we're talking about there is code that is where the commits are logged, they're attributed to authors, they're branched and then merged back and tagged to become production releases. That entire process is managed in a very systematic way, and it's a very mature discipline. Open source software has relied on version control for many, many years, and now many closed source projects, of course, rely on this fundamental tool. It can be used in a much wider context than just authoring the bits of application code that we deploy. Every aspect of our digital project can be versioned and managed in that way, and it helps us with the collaboration. Looking at engineering, provisioning, configuration management, containerization, orchestration, these are all things that we can solve with source code, and we're going to look at different tools and how they can be applied to each one of these disciplines. Monitoring, logging, performance management, continuous integration, again another set of tools that we'll be looking at to deliver each one of those functions that end up being crucial to what it is we're trying to build. Of course, ahead of discussion of engineering, I like to talk a little bit about architecture. I usually introduce engineering first because it's when talking about source code, it's the one where there's an easy link. But actually, architecture and the development of robust, well-governed architecture is keyed upon source code as well. We can do functional and non-functional requirements as source, so that our specification is being built up progressively in a version control way. Our block diagrams can be written as XML, and we'll look at tools that allow integration of different diagram structures into our code repository. our API definitions, message schema, all of this architecture moving forward with the project, often just one step ahead, learning from the lessons that are being picked up by the project team as we go through this, mapping out the uncertainty and complexity and producing the clarity we need to actually realize the project really well. Testing is crucial to all of this. Test-driven development is something that we've allocated at Lightenna for years, and I think it's becoming really deeply embedded in the industry. But alongside test-driven development that helps us focus very much on only developing code that matches requirements, because we take a requirement, we map it to a test, and then that test informs the code that we're writing. Behavior-driven development is crucial. So as well as taking user stories and mapping them into behaviors, we can then extrapolate from there to produce tests, which in turn ensure that we're building the right thing. Unit testing to ensure that we're building it right, integration testing to see that the whole journey hangs together, and then regression testing, so we aggregate a suite of unit tests over the course of the development, unit tests that span both development and operations, that span all the aspects we talked about a second ago, the provisioning, the config management, as well as the application setup and the continuous delivery pipeline, and allow us to sort of pull right through in a well-managed, well-structured way. Governance and security can also be part of this. So rather than leave those processes to be gates or blockers as we're working through a development cycle, they can be integrated, embedded in the team, and elemental in actually instrumental in delivering the compliance, the audit, the risk assessments that are part of the project. And those risks begin as the project begins. So as decisions are being made, that risk viewpoint and that security mindset is being brought to all those decisions, so they're embedded in the project rather than that being an afterthought where we get to a release and then have to try and work out whether it's sufficiently secure. Our governance checklist can be baked right into that, as can a stakeholder engagement matrix. So whether we are going to work with different stakeholders in a way where they're responsible or accountable for things, where they're consulted or informed, whatever the mechanism by which we're going to communicate with them, that can be again baked into the project. So as the project matures, it matures on several axes simultaneously, not independent of that. To summarise, as I mentioned earlier, over the course of the next few weeks and months, we're going to be releasing an open source example of this, and that will grow with maturity as time passes, and each one of the versions will get tagged so you can see how that's grown. If you're working on a project and you'd like some support, Lightenna can help, both in terms of consulting, hands-on engineering, but also on-site training to help you deeply embed DevOps culture into your team. Thanks for listening.